The contacts feature in Denari can serve two functions, both at the same time when needed. First, it can be a simple to-do list type application related to your donors. You can create a task, assign that task to a Denari user, set a scheduled date, and review to verify that the task has been completed. Second, it can be a place to record contacts like phone calls, emails sent, etc., and store them for future reference. We'll start by taking a look at how you might use contacts to schedule tasks. We'll look first at a contact record and then back up to look at how we set up some of its elements. We'll go first to the name record. We'll click the Names button here on the left, Name List Management, and I'll just select the name record here for demonstration purposes. Now we can click on Contacts History on the right. Here we see a list of all the contact records that have been created for this donor. In this case there's only one. I'll click on that one, but you could click on Add New to create a new one if needed. This page provides a record of your contact with this donor. It can be created either in mass, as we'll look at in a few minutes, or manually, as we're doing here. So the description field should describe the nature of the contact. You could enter phone number, phone call, email, banquet, follow-up phone call, whatever makes the most sense to you for this record. The scheduled date is either the date you plan to complete this task or contact in the future, or the date that you made the contact. The Assigned To field is also called Resources, or a resource in other parts of Denari. It's the person who will or who has completed the task. This person must have a user record in Denari, and we'll look at where you set those up in a few minutes. Schedule type or task type is another field that you will create the values for. They're usually things like phone call, email, etc. They're the task that's going to be performed, and it's described in that task record. Priority and status are fairly self-explanatory. Priority lets you designate the importance, and the status field reminds you of where you are in the process. The Q for Label checkbox field allows you to set this record up to have a mailing label printed. You may work on several records throughout the day. Then, at the end of the day, print labels for all those with boxes checked. Denari will create them in an Avery 5160 format and then uncheck this box so that you don't have to go back and manually uncheck them all again. And we'll look at later how you run those labels. The Notes field can be used for several things, which we'll look at later. So now let's back up. First, let's look at how we set up scheduled types. I'll click the CRM button on the left and then choose Task Types or Scheduled Types. Again, a task type is an activity. We'll look at shortly how to set up a bunch of tasks to do as a group, and types are an important part of that process. Let's say you did a fundraising event and want to follow up with a phone call in 10 days. First, you'll create the type by clicking Add New here. You'll give the record a description, and in this case it might be banquet follow-up. Give it a code just like you would in any other record in Denari. You can select a type and choose a lookup color if needed. The color will help you identify certain types of tasks from a list that we'll see later. The default text field can be several things. If you were making a phone call, you might jot down 3 things that you want to cover in the phone call as reminders to yourself. If this is a letter, you could type the entire letter here, and we'll see why in a little bit later. And then finally, save the record. Now I know this may be a little confusing at this point, but it should make more sense later when you see it all put together. Now we need to set up our resources. They are the people who will be assigned to the specific contact tasks. Again, we're going to go to the CRM button on the left and then click on Assign to or Resource. Click Add New to create a new one, but I'm just going to go ahead and click on one that's already here. First you'll enter the person's name, and then you'll select their user record from the drop-down field, and then check the active checkbox if it's not already checked. The resource person, again, must have a user record in Denari, so they've already been set up to be able to access Denari, and you're choosing that user record. You can set up other staff members who will be performing the tasks as needed. There are three ways that contacts can be used, with the final result being a record of the contact with the name record. The first we'll look at is the to-do list. To make this easier to follow, let's imagine that we just finished a fundraising event like a golf tournament, and we want to follow up by sending a letter to each of the golfers. You could, of course, adapt this to any scenario. Earlier, as the golfers were signing up, we assigned a classification to each of them so that we can easily get a list when needed. Now we're ready to schedule that follow-up letter. We need to first set up the task type, following the steps we discussed earlier. So let's review that quickly. We'll click on CRM, Task Types, and we can click on Add New to create a new one. So after filling in the description and the code, we'll type the body of the letter down here in the default text field. So now we can schedule the follow-up. First, we need to create a name segment that identifies the golfers using the classification we've assigned to each of them. If you need help with Name Segmenter, you can check out that video on that topic. Now we'll go to the gear icon and then Mass Scheduler. In the first field, we'll select that name segment that's going to identify the golfers. In the Schedule Type field, we'll select the follow-up letter. That's the task type that we set up earlier. We'll give this a scheduled date, so that's the date that we want the task to be performed. And then we'll select a resource from our list, the person who will perform the task. Finally, we can mark the items open or closed. In this case, we want them to be open as we create this set of tasks so that we can close them as we complete each task. But there are some occasions when you just want to make a record of a contact in mass, but there's no task to complete, so you can mark them complete as you create the record. When we click the Make Schedule Entries button on the right, Denari will create a contact record in each golfer's name record. When the person or resource that these tasks have been assigned to comes in each morning, they can click the CRM button here on the left and then click on View All Open Items. Here they will see a list of the items that are scheduled for today. You can click on them in each item in the list and it will open. Since this is a letter, they can click the Get Defaults Note button at the top. Now the letter body field will fill in from the task type that you created earlier into this notes field. Then you can click the print letter button here on the right and Denari will produce an 8.5 by 11 page letter that will go into your inbox. You can then print it and drop it in the mail. If this were a reminder to make a phone call, you could enter the 2 or 3 items you want to discuss with the donor in the task type record instead of a letter body. When you click on Get Notes, that will fill into the notes field. Now click the completed checkbox and hit Save. And then you can return back to the list to continue today's tasks. You can also filter this page by date if you want to work on items from a date other than today. Just select the date and hit Search. The second way that we can use contacts is to provide storage for individual contacts. In other words, let's say you're calling or emailing major donors and want a record of your contacts. Just before making that phone call, open the donor's name, and so we'll select names on the left, name list management. Again, I'll select the first name record here. Contacts history. And again, we could click Add New if we're getting ready to make this phone call. I'm just going to go ahead and open the one that's already here. Again, you'll enter a description that describes this. So in this case, it might be major donor phone call. We'll enter the date that the phone call is being made. The resource is the person who is making the call. And if needed, you could enter a schedule type or task type here. And that contains the items that you want to be reminded of. After selecting the schedule type, you can again click on Get Default Notes, and it will then fill in those items that you want to remind yourself of as you're in that phone call. While on the call, you could click the date and time stamp, and that will enter that information into the field automatically for you. You now have a record of the call. So let me click the lookup button here to go back to the contacts overview page for this donor. And here's where that new call would appear. And again, over time, you'll have a list of these contacts that you've made with this donor. And that then brings us to the third way that contacts are used. That is as a record for emails sent from Denari. There are 2 ways to do this, as mass emails and as single emails. For more detailed information about this, you can check out the video about sending emails. The result is that a contact record is created for each email sent, which of course provides a record of the contact. Now, back on the CRM page, I want to point out the reminders link. It shows a list of all open contacts. This is similar to the View All Open Items report we just talked about. You can use the filter fields at the top, just like filtering on name records, to change the contents of the list. You could also work from this list here if needed. Just click on one of the contact records, finish the task, and then mark it completed. Click the lookup button to go back to the list. Now, you may also have noticed back on the CRM tab, marketing plans and marketing plans triggers. We'll cover those in their own videos. There are 3 reports available, and you'll find them by clicking the Reports button on the left and then CRM. First, we see the labels for queued items. You may remember that when we discussed the setup of a contact record, we saw the Q for Label checkbox. When you run this routine and leave all of the fields blank, Denari will go and find all the contact records that have the box checked and produce mailing labels in Avery 5160 format for those name records linked to those contact records. It will also then uncheck the box to set it up to run again. If you want to filter the labels somewhat, you can use the department code fields or the user code fields here. The second report is called the scheduled call. I'm sorry, I went to the wrong button. So the second report is the scheduled call log report. And I know it's a little bit off of your screen there. You can filter this report by resource, type, and target call date. You can then print this in PDF format by clicking the link at the top. Some people find it easier to work off of a printed document rather than the computer screen when making phone calls. However, you'll still need to update the records in Denari. The third report is the scheduled call log report summary. This is more of a management type report and can be filtered by target date. Again, you can print this by clicking the Make PDF link here at the top. The big value in using the contacts feature in Denari is that it provides a record of contacts made with each donor. You may find that you only want this for some of your donors, or you may want to keep those records for all of your donors. There's no limit to the number of contact records that you can create. If you have any questions about this feature, please contact our tech support office through the Help button at the top of the Denari page.